What if a person needs to go to a job interview, and he knows that by wearing a head covering, he would likely not be accepted to get that job, but if he would end up getting hired, he would be allowed to cover his head while working? Is this person allowed to temporarily take off his head covering for the job interview? The next law in Yekut Yosef addresses the issue of going bareheaded when necessary. This is especially applicable if someone fears that by wearing a head covering it would affect his livelihood, such as going to a job interview, a government office, retail stores, a bank, and so on. But if it comes down to not wearing a head covering because of non-observant people that are against their religious people, or they make fun of them, in that case the person should not uncover his head and he should face those people without fear. The Got Moshe says that according to the Talmud, there's no prohibition to go bareheaded. Although today it's become the status of a genuine custom to keep one's head covered at all times, it falls in the category of a genuine mitzvah. But when it comes to a person being faced with a financial loss for observing the practice of covering one's head, he says that a person in this situation isn't obligated to make such a sacrifice. And the Yekut Yosef agrees with this, that in a situation where one will lose one's job for wearing a head covering, that person is allowed to take it off in order to get that job. If someone finds himself in a situation where he has to be in a secular court, it's permitted for him if he's asked or forced to take off his head covering. While he's in the situation, however, he's allowed to think about Torah topics while remaining bareheaded. The Talmud in Shabbat 150a rules clearly that one can think about Torah topics even while he's completely naked. And the only issue is when it comes to speaking of Torah. In a case where a person finds himself in a situation, or he put himself in a situation, where if he doesn't remove his head covering, it could lead to desecrating Hashem's name. For example, if he wants to go to the movies, but he knows that if he goes to the movies while wearing a kippah, he would be causing a desecration of Hashem's name by non-Jews or non-observant people seeing this. In this case, there's no room for leniency for a person to remove his head covering in order to attend such events or go to such places. Rather, this is more of a reason or excuse for this person to go. What if a person recited blessings, or if someone is praying the Amidah alone at home, and his head covering falls off during his prayer, and he only notices after he finishes praying? Does he now need to repeat the prayers again? Yekut Yosef says that this person's prayer is valid and he does not have to repeat it. If someone was bareheaded and he heard thunder or saw lightning, it's technically allowed for him to say the blessing without a head covering, because these blessings on thunder and lightning are required to be said within 1 second. There's room for leniency here. If he can, he should try to cover his head with a sleeve or put someone else's hand on his head. If none of these options are possible at the moment for whatever reason, he can use his own hand to cover his head. At what age should parents start training their children to cover their heads? Our sages taught that covering the heads of children instills the fear of heaven in the child's heart, and that this should be done as soon as the child begins to walk, and certainly when he gets to the age of 3 years old. Yekut Yosef says that if the child refuses to cover his head, the parents should try persuading him with rewards for doing so. In Shabbat 156b, it tells a story about the mother of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, that she never allowed him to go without a head covering, and that it's recommended to follow her practice to instill the fear of heaven in our children's hearts.